And today on the podcast, I'm delighted to have Annelise Peso. Annelise is a leadership coach. She also headed up Morgan Stanley and she's been a lawyer in leading law firms. As always, I'm going to let Annelise introduce herself and explain that in her own words. But the reason I've asked Annelise on stage for this discussion is that I help people to look confident in their jobs, at work and in life. And Annelise helps people to feel confident in her capacity as a coach from the inside, because obviously style is external, but it all starts from the inside. And as a whole package, it's really important to have it all tied together. But also, while I share lots of fashion advice on this podcast that is universal, most of my in-person clients are actually professionals. I get a lot of lawyers, people who, bankers, people like that, leadership people, high level professionals. And you help people, Annelise, I'll ask you in a second to introduce yourself quickly, to really make it and thrive in the corporate world and to feel confident from within. So I'm doing it from the outside. So I just thought it'd be useful to have this discussion today. So welcome. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast.
No, thank you for inviting me. I'm absolutely honored to be here. And I really would absolutely love to talk about this subject. I'm very passionate about confidence. I'm also passionate about fashion, being Italian, and having lived in an environment where people look after themselves. But yeah, like you introduced me correctly, I was an international banking and finance lawyer. So I worked for a Magic Circle law firm like Clifford Chance and Linklaters. And then I was the head of legal for Morgan Stanley, Italy, for about 10 years. And then about 10 years ago, I've decided I wanted to wear another hat. So I qualified as an executive coach. And I have studied positive psychology, trauma-informed coaching, agile team coaching, and stress management and resilience. And I help lawyers and professionals to sharpen their leadership skills so that they can have high-performing teams. And when I start working with them, I always really start from self-leadership, which is the capacity to lead yourself and to lead your life. And the cornerstone of self-leadership is self-care. Now, self-care has become a buzzword recently with, let's look after ourselves. But in fact, self-care is a very holistic approach to life. And it basically relates to looking after our body, our mind, our spiritual health, and our emotional health. So it means, yes, nourish ourselves and sleep and drink well and do exercise, but also means looking our limiting belief at how we manage our stress and how we actually pursue activities that are meaningful, that gives us meaning, and also how we manage our emotion, how we bring positive emotion into our life, and how we deal with negative emotion. All of this, and it's a lot, is self-care.
Yeah, I was going to kick off with asking you actually about this sort of, how people manage in the corporate world these days with confidence, because it is a rough, well, not rough, but it's high paid, it's high powered.
Mm-hmm.
The demands are high. Especially if you're in a leadership position in the
Mm-hmm.
corporate world.
Mm-hmm.
Self-care is something, like you say, it's like a bit of a buzzword, and some people think, oh, it means a bubble bath.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just have a bubble bath. That's a bit of self-care. It's actually loads more. It goes much deeper than that. And like you said, leading yourself is a cornerstone of coaching, isn't it? And helping people to be good leaders, because until you're able to really look after yourself and lead yourself, you can't be then an influencer at work and create a safe emotional environment which helps people to thrive at work.
Absolutely.
So, this is what I want to get to today, and why I wanted this discussion, because I help lots of people in the corporate world with what they wear.
Yeah.
What sorts of things do they come to you? What are they struggling with? Is it mostly stress? Is it the
Yeah.
whole the demand culture that we're in. I think we work long hours in the UK
Yes,
as well. I'm sure
yes,
probably in all across Europe, and I know in
absolutely.
America as well,
Yeah, yeah,
law firms, the
yes.
hours are absolutely brutal. So what sorts of things do they really struggle with, and how do you help them?
Well, they struggle with lack of time, pressure, high workload, and the workload is not just easy; it's complex. So there is a lot of intellectual stimulation. So there is a lot of stress going on, and not enough recovery. They struggle with sort of like performance. So there is a culture of competition very often, of who is
Mm.
doing the best and who is better than who. So there is a lot there. So there is a lot of pressure, and there is a constant push to do more. But the problem is that if we do not insert looking after ourselves from all those 4 points of view that I mentioned earlier, we are likely to burn out. Or if we don't burn out, we are really, really stressed. And actually, we can have an impact on the team and not making our firm, our team to actually perform at their best. Because at some point, no one wants to be with someone that is always stressed and always under the wire and always about to explode, because all this pressure doesn't make us have the best communication and the best relationship. And if we think about positive psychology, which is the part of psychology that looks at thriving and developing potential and flourishing, positive psychology looks at relationship, communication, positive emotion, flow at work, and looking at reaching goals and having purpose, goals and meaning in our life. And all of this cannot be sort of like managed without first starting from ourselves. So intentionally understanding what is it that we need to look after ourselves, so then actually we can be reaching goals, and we can be managing teams and being at our best to perform. There's been actually studies that have shown links between self-care and self-discipline. So the more you look after yourself, the more you manage your time, you are assertive for your own needs, do some self-reflection, the more actually you are able to pursue goals that are aligned with your strength, your values, and your desire. And once you have accomplished those goals, you feel more confident, right? You feel more self assured. Hence, it's easier then to continue to look after yourself. So it's a vicious cycle.
This is something I talk about a lot on the podcast. So again, it's about learning about yourself. Knowledge is power, particularly about yourself. So when you learn your own values, we are going to be talking about style in a second.
Yeah,
We are going to be talking
sure.
a lot about fashion and image and all
Sure.
of that. But it's if you know your values and you are clear on your boundaries and all these kinds of things, and you get that clarity, you can then be more authentically yourself, which means you can then be more confident. And in a
Absolutely.
corporate workplace, I think that's probably really, really important. I mean, what are the traits of successful people? Because personally, I struggle with anxiety, and I used to work in corporate years ago, and I found it really quite a difficult. I mean, to be honest, I wasn't in the right job, so that doesn't help.
Mm-hmm.
You're a certain person, aren't you? Who some
Mm-hmm.
people thrive in that environment, others corporate is just not for them. But I really struggled with feeling anxious a lot. So public speaking and all that kind of stuff was
Yeah.
really hard. So what are good ways to deal with stress? Like if you're in a really high pressure environment.
Well, this is a very complex issue, and we need another podcast to
Yeah.
address this. But I think again, I go back, and I don't want to sound a broken record, but I go back to what do I do during the day, okay, to have sustainable things that make me look after myself from a physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional way. So to me, stress means pressure, okay? And I react to stress in a proactive way. So if I'm reactive to stress, means that stress basically oppresses me. But if I respond to stress, respond is, responsibility, the ability to respond. That means I'm better in control of the situation. Maybe I'm not in control of everything, but as much as I can have an impact of what's happening around me. So, for example, I can put boundaries, or I can say, I'm going to have lunch outside rather than my desk, or I have 10 minutes to chat with a friend or have lunch with a friend. So, cultivate all those things that for positive psychology are important pillars for well-being. For example, being trying to bring positive emotion like gratitude or altruism in the workplace. These are all things that help us with stress. Um, so yeah, so this, I mean, the subject of stress is very wide.
Yeah.
It's a lot to talk about. But I think if we have, for example, during the day, 2 or 3 times a day, in the morning, at lunchtime, and in the evening, where we have some self reflection and do something for ourselves. It can be 15 minutes yoga, it can be lunch outside in the sun, it can be journaling or doing some gratitude exercise in the evening, or like going for a run with a friend, so that we have the relation as well as the exercise. All these things help us because we carve some time for our well-being, and this
Yeah.
is really important. So we become more resilient to stress. So
Right.
we basically, I mean, to really say this in a nutshell, to actually carve out sometimes for the things that make us feel good and regenerate us. That's
Yeah.
so important.
Yeah, totally. I mean, this is definitely something that all this talk wasn't around when I worked in corporate 20 years ago. It was a very different landscape.
Oh, yeah,
And
I
it's
know. I
so
know.
good. I mean, thank goodness, now, people have the positive mindset and they understand about self-care and looking after yourself. So you can then shine like you're supposed to, because that helps you. So, obviously all of this is so, so important because as I've said, I dress people who work in these sorts of roles, but you can't just say, put on this dress and then you'll be super confident, full stop. There's a lot more to it.
Yeah, I mean, what you do is actually enhance the feature, and it's a great place to start to kickstart, the process. So by dressing with your body type and putting certain vibrant colors, you feel better.
Mm.
But at the same time, you have to obviously, that's not enough. They've got to do more. And basically the dress is a container for our body. So if we are, for example, we've got a nice dress and maybe we kickstart our fitness routine because, this dress makes me feel nice,
Mm.
and attractive. So I want to do more. So I'm going to start exercising, or I'm going to start eating better and sleeping better. I'm going to look after myself better. So, by helping them to look better, you can kickstart an internal process. I mean, let's remember that the Latin used to say mens sana in corpore sano, which means healthy mind in healthy body. So the two things are connected. We have to look after both.
Yeah, definitely. It's so important. I just wanted to ask you actually, what made you go into law in the first place? What was it that drew you into a career in law?
That's a good question. I mean, I was too young to make a proper decision. I really wanted to be a psychologist, but my mom is a lawyer, basically, is a notary, which is like a sort of lawyer in Italy, and my dad is a doctor, so it was almost expected that I was
Mm.
going to do one or the other. However, when I started studying law, I got really passionate about criminal law and the mind again of why people do certain things, and like all the psychological sort of like aspects of crimes and things like that. But then I decided to come abroad in London, where the best way for me was to actually specialize in banking law, to be an international lawyer, so that I could actually travel more and have a more sort of like international career. So it was a bit sort of like by chance, it wasn't intentional.
Right.
And in fact, now I went back into not criminal law, but I went back into understanding the mind body connection and help people to sort of like be, more confident and more performing at work. So I went back into where I wanted to be. But it's been amazing to be a lawyer. I think it's been a wonderful experience from an intellectual perspective, a human perspective, incredible, challenging, but at the same time, incredibly expansive for growth.
For growth, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, the thing is now, you've lived the life, so you're advising lawyers and people who've been in that corporate world now, from a coaching perspective. But you've actually lived that life, and I've got a corporate background from years ago. I spent 10 years in banking and that
oh
kind of
wow,
world. So and I'm now dressing people that work in that world. So it's sort of we've both sort of gone a
yeah,
bit full circle, but we
yeah,
understand that
yes.
where how it is. So what sort of did you power dress when you were in those days? What was your kind of
Yes. I have to say, if some of my colleagues listens to this, they will remember me being always quite, I have to say, I was, for me, dressing well, especially, in those days where they started to introduce the casual days at that time, about 15, 20 years ago. But before, it was suit and super corporate, super elegant. And I come from Italy, where, to be honest, it's very difficult to see people that are dressed badly. Everyone is very attentive to their style and fashion.
mm,
So yes, I used to dress quite elegantly, but I always had a twist of, because I am not a classic sort of like corporate person, I always had a bit of a twist, something a bit different. But you have to look at the part, and you have to dress in the context, of course. But yeah, I had a bit of like, I could be serious, but I always had an element of fun in my style.
so you're not completely traditional, because we're talking of, so you're obviously Italian, like you say, and I see Italian style as sort of close to the French, because in the way
Yes,
that it's very classic and polished.
yes, yes,
I think the French have quite a lot of rules. They're sort of quite traditional in what they expect people to wear.
yes.
Do you know what I mean? And I think maybe the Italians have more flair in that way. I don't know. I'm generalising here, completely
Yeah,
generalising.
no, of course. I mean, style is a very personal thing. I mean, certainly, I've lived here for, oh my God, too many years. And in fact, what I'm wearing at the moment is a shirt by an English designer called Celia Birthwell.
Oh yes.
Yes, and I had this shirt for many years, one of my favorite. And I love mixing up a bit of like designer, a bit of high street, and um, I don't dress as much these days because I mainly work from home as a coach, online. Although sometimes I go and see my clients and I do workshop live, and so I don't dress as much as I want.
Mm.
But and you can find me a lot in Sweaty Betty these days. But I always love to, to me, fashion is a big part of my life, and I love it. And yeah, and I think even people that didn't grow up in a family where fashion was important. Like, for example, in my family, my mom has always been very attentive to fashion, a little bit also flamboyant and original in her fashion. And if you're not used to that, so if you grew up in a family where fashion wasn't important, you may think that it's not important. And that's why your work is so fundamental, to make people understand that it's important to look after yourself also from a fashion perspective.
Well, people definitely think that, not, a lot of people, not all people, but a lot of people in a work environment, particularly in a corporate, serious, traditional work environment,
Yeah.
it's thought of as you can't be intellectual and wear really nice clothes and be fashionable. Do you know what I mean? There's a bit of a bimbo tag attached to it.
Oh, yes,
Like, you
absolutely.
know,
Yeah.
people, and it does drive me mad. So it's as if you can't really look nice
Yeah.
and be a high powered lawyer.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, I'm not going to start talking about patriarchy because this is another subject. But, like there is this assumption that if a woman dresses nice and, she's attractive and all of a sudden she's a bimbo, she's silly or she's not clever. And I think this is, excuse my, I don't want to say the word
Yeah.
BS,
Yeah.
but it's a silly collective limiting belief, and we are proving that is not true, right? And there are so many women out there that are attractive, they dress well, they are confident, and they're incredible trailblazer, and they are changing the industries. So obviously it's not true.
But someone said to you recently, because you look nice, you
Yeah.
were at an event, and they said they were surprised that you were intelligent.
I know. I mean, I know that some people still think like that, but I think it's the evidence. I hope I look and I dress the part, and I look good. But at the same time, like what I've done in my life, my career, the results that I've reached, and like I'm still, I have a lot to learn, and I haven't arrived in the slightest, and I've got a lot to learn and a lot to grow. But shows, and like many other women, that that's not the case, and it's the same for you, right?
It is, and it's just, this feeling and this thought that it's a frivolous thing,
Yeah.
But I mean, also we've got the added thing now of consumerism. We've had 40 years of consuming and fast fashion, and
Yeah.
all that kind of
Yeah.
side of it, which is you know something that we have to be aware of and we have to be more mindful. But it's not about that. It's not about people look at it as a kind of self-obsessed pursuit in a way, if you're interested in.
Yes, I want to actually clarify something. One thing is to look after yourself physically,
Mm,
although it's not enough. You've got to look after your mind, your emotion, we said, your spirituality, all those good things. But one thing is look after yourself physically and dressing well. One thing is being compulsive in buying clothes all the time. To actually, it's almost like a compulsion, it's almost a pathology, because obviously when we buy something new, we've got a hit of dopamine. Okay, so we buy something, hit of dopamine, then it ends up in our wardrobe, and that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about fast fashion and consuming a lot and
no.
being unkind to our environment. As I said, I had this shirt for maybe 15 years. It's still amazing.
Yeah.
So it's also about understanding, okay, maybe there are some things that I need to change, other things that I can recycle, stuff that I had before that I can match and mix in a different way. It doesn't mean going out there and spend like a lunatic. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, you know trying to dress in the most appropriate way for the situation, in a way that makes us feel comfortable. It has to be comfortable, of course, and makes us feel more confident.
I mean, the thing is at work as well now, it's become more of a minefield for people dressing for work. I'm talking about now because you can bring yourself to the office more. So you can, when you worked in corporate before, you would put a suit on, and it was quite easy to put a suit on. I know
Hmm.
you added, some accessories and stuff to personalise it,
Yeah.
but those days have gone now, and you wear sort of smart separates. Few
Yeah, but
people,
I used to actually wear loads of dresses as well.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that sort of like tailored dress was very much a boardroom staple. So people would wear the sort of Roland Moray style tailored dress. And I was just talking on the podcast last week about the new series of The Apprentice that's come out in the UK, and the girls in The Apprentice are still wearing the same clothes that they wore 18 years ago. Not the actual same clothes, but the same style of clothes. It's that really sort of dated boardroom look. But what the point I'm trying to make is, it's about if you get to know yourself in all ways, so in all ways in life. So, like you say, you get to know your values, you get to know your boundaries, you understand these things that light you up, all of these things. But in a fashion sense, you learn about what you like, what you don't like. Just take some time to do that. Then you will shop in a more mindful, successful way and consume less.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because if you don't get that clarity, then you might be, inclined to like just buy things because you don't really know what you're doing, and and it
Why
never
people
really.
need your help.
Exactly, that's exactly why they need my help. But people don't take a step back. Really, they don't take a step back and think, what is it that I want to wear? How do I want to project myself at work? I want to feel confident at work, but it's good to look confident at work as well. And it's a competitive world, isn't it? So,
Yeah.
you know,
Stepping back and self-reflection, I believe, especially in today's world, that is a VUCA word: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It's essential.
right, yeah, to reflect and just, and also to reflect quite regularly as well,
Absolutely. Yeah.
like just do it in January and then, not do it again for 2 years or whatever. Kind of, take time because
Well,
we're
yeah.
evolving so much all the time that it makes sense to do that.
Yeah. Well,
So
that's why, it's a good idea to hire a coach as well.
it absolutely is, and I've used coaches in my business, and it definitely has helped me to open my mind to things because we get so caught in ruts, of what we believe, like, the belief thing, the limiting belief that we talked about, people just assuming because you're interested in clothes and you're attractive or whatever, that you're not intelligent. And what does the head of the law firm at Morgan Stanley look like in someone's mind?
Well, to
Do
be
you know what I
honest,
mean?
yeah, actually, my boss, I had two bosses, a man and a woman. Then the man was a little bit older. The woman was, she actually tried, and she was dressing nicely. I have to say, there was a culture of dressing well, and I hope I contributed as well to raise the bar. When the Italian came. But it was an environment where people were dressing relatively well, I have to say.
Yeah, that's good. So what do you think of British style, Annalise? Do you
I
think?
love it. I love to. It's a bit different from Italian style, but it's a bit more original. I mean, we tend to have more structured clothes, like
Yeah.
more sort of like stuff that it's more body shaped and things like that. Where sometimes here there it's a bit more like a long skirt and a bit more sort of like uh, airy, in a way. But
Maybe boho, bit eclectic,
yeah, it's a bit more eclectic, a bit more, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. Whenever I go to Italy or anything, I'm amazed at like how smart everyone is. It does stand out. I'm just like, wow.
It is. It is true. I mean, sometimes it's even too much. I mean, people go to the supermarket and they're dressed like they're going for a, I don't know, for a dinner or something. So yeah, I mean, I've been influenced by the culture, and I mean, if you think about it, all the most the incredible fashion designer, they started in Italy, and there's always a connection between fashion, art, food. Italy is seen as the country where all these sort of like, in a way, good life things come
Yeah.
from.
I have got this saying that I've used for years, which is don't dress badly just because everyone else does. And it's kind of, it really is a mantra to live by. So, I'll get dressed up sometimes to go to the pub or whatever. And my husband will be like, do you really need to wear that? We're just going to the pub. Yes, I do need to wear that because
Exactly.
I'm expressing myself and I'm not going to be dressing down
Yes.
just because everybody else is dressing down.
Yeah. I think many of my friends, if you listen to this, they will agree that sometimes, oh, here's Annie, super dressed and everything. But hey, this is me, take it or leave it.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I think most of the time people will look and say, oh, maybe I wish I'd made more of an effort.
Yes. But
Sadly, it comes back to
you're
which,
also an inspiration for them. And in fact, the more they spend time with you, the more they are inclined to up their wardrobe, and their style.
and that's that's been influenced by, like you say, environments. You're influenced with your style coming from Italy, and you're influenced by people who are around you. But again, don't be influenced in a negative sense and sort of bring, hide your light. You should shine your
Absolutely.
light.
Absolutely. We should all, the more you shine, the more you allow other people to do the same.
And excellent tips there as well on confidence in the corporate world. So thank you so much, Annelise, for joining me today.
Thank you, Lisa. It was such a pleasure. And yeah, I was delighted to have this conversation with you.
That's great. I just stopped the recording.